So hi, I am Emily Ullman, and I am here today with my friend Amy Jupiter, and I'm so thrilled to have this fireside chat with Amy, which is sort of a long time coming because Amy and we met
A year
and a half ago,
yeah.
a year ago. But I mean, it's been incredible getting to know Amy and to learn more about her work and sort of her legacy and the things that she has been doing, which are so inspiring to so many people, including myself. So it's wonderful and it's great to have a chance to sit down with you, relax, and, really kind of dig into some of these philosophical questions that you've been so fortunate to be able to, engage in throughout your work. So maybe you can start by telling me a little bit about, what is inspiring you these days? What is the most what is the one of the visions that you have when you think about where your work might head, where it's been going?
Well, I really love experience design. I really love large format film. I love attraction making. I really love theme parks. I love the idea of the architecture of reassurance. I love hyperreality. It was really interesting to see Avi Barzi's talk and have an illustration of what the metaverse hyperreality could look like, and that was a little alarming because of the idea of how much information is out there. But I also thought the idea of filtering, and it's so interesting as we talk about sort of being neuroatypical and the inability to filter, and that the idea that your glasses or your headset or your heads-up display will help you filter. I thought that was a really interesting idea because when we do experience design, people ask about how do you get people to look where you want? And we use their humanity basically as a proprioceptive hacker. We use your limbic response, and you pay attention to the thing that is of highest contrast, of the brightest value, of the thing that might hurt you. Surprise. People pay attention to things that surprise them. And so I was really interested in some of the ideas of the supportive technologies really helping people to be more comfortable, more reassured, more targeted in the world. That actually was one of the things that was inspirational about hearing at the last AUREA Awards the conversations that have been having around the metaverse and then hardware, supportive hardware.
Yeah, I think that the feeling I had when looking at Avi's talk again, where in that video he was trying to illustrate what would happen in sort of a future case scenario where we have this hyper reality, sort of all of this information, this data is mapped on the real world. And he was trying to illustrate that augmented reality obviously can become chaotic if we don't have filters for it, and if you just layer even one additional layer of somebody's visual field, and then you layer more on that. Maybe it's advertising, maybe it's I don't know what it is, but that crash of information together would obviously overwhelm somebody. And so we have this choice to personally filter. But what if we zoom out a little bit and we say, but if we have no technology, then we already have filters? And I think that's what gets me thinking about what you're talking about, just the basic human response to a filter of what's happening in my environment. Not the technology, but just the physical world.
I pedal in the real world, and I love the real world. And so that is always the place I start, with the real human experience and with my human experience. Obviously, at a design table, I always would like to have multiple points of view. I don't represent everybody, and I think that in designing for the common person, there really is no common person, but there's common humanity, and we have basic human responses physically, emotionally, and you try to sort of deal with the basic ideas of beauty, things that are a higher quality of life, things that are comforting. Like I said, I really am motivated by reassurance and happiness and wonder and awe as my sort of motivating emotional state, and inspiration and aspiration, and how do you physically communicate those things without words?
So those things, and I've heard you say this before in other conversations that we've had and talks that you've given, where you want to get people to that place beyond words, that is an intention that you set to try to get them there. And I wonder also if you're trying to have somebody come through an experience and for it to be positive, A, we're going to get them to the place beyond words, but B, we want to create wonder, we want to create awe. And I love how you have also said in previous talks where it's like the physicality of that is looking up, is lifting your head, is directing your attention to something that will give you that surprise.
Well, that opens you up. I mean, it when you tip your chin up, your autonomic nervous system opens your chest, opens your breath. You can't really feel anything when you're not breathing. We like to encourage people to breathe, and then we manipulate them because you're really also manipulating anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. When you want people to sort of pay attention, you're pretty much manipulating everything. Mm-hmm. And so you cultivate and groom anxiety and relief as counterpoints to each other. And posture is one of those things that sort of helps support how people feel, mm-hmm. whether they're going forward. How we want you to feel by the posture we put you in, especially on a ride attraction. Mm-hmm. And we think about that from the beginning. How do we want to make you feel? And oftentimes the mechanics of the ride really dictate some of those, the realities of situation and load and unload, and the practicality sometimes get in the way. But then you really do, then what is the next thing that you can really lean people into? Mm-hmm. What does it say to someone when they do lean in? Mm-hmm.
And so you've spent many years working as an Imagineer. You started as an intern and you worked your way up to a chief creative director,
an executive producer.
I'm not sure
experienced designer. I know there's a lot of titles, and they mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So,
but I think that the point is that you
crew
started
chief.
Right, crew chief. And
I don't do everything alone, so it's all like sort of like a little, sort of like an urger, an encourager of creativity and autonomy. So
yeah, but I think starting also like as an intern, you're really doing things. I mean, you were a teenager. You were in your late teens, early 20s.
Early 20s, yeah.
Okay, so late teens, early 20s. Let's just say that was a while ago, and you were doing this.
Ancient now.
Yes.
Not
so. No, but the point is that you started sort of, I would say, approaching the world through the lens of. Right? Starting to...
Well, I took apart cameras. I learned to take apart like military cameras there were special format cameras all over, we'll call it wet enterprises because I'm that old. And
okay, Walt Elias
Disney.
Walter Elias Disney. That's what wet enterprises
That is what
for.
wet enterprises is. And so circle vision cameras, stereo 65 cameras, they were all built by the Imagineers. And at the studio, I just happened to be next door to the camera department, and I would just watch this older gentleman take apart the cameras, and he just one day looked at me and he's like, "You keep looking at me. Come on over here, kid." And he gave me a camera. And also it was next door to the animation department, the FX department, the matte painting department. So I learned all about gimbal cameras, down shooters, what it was to do special process photography, slit scan photography, backlight animation for effects, and the blinky lights. One of the gentlemen who was one of my mentors, Glenn Campbell, was the gentleman who did the blinky lights in Blade Runner, and just these double exposures and single exposures, and the amazing matte painters that were there. I just was fascinated by, and how old Thomas Edison did special process, photography. And really, when you think about the history of use of film, it was in illusion in opera, so that people didn't have to you couldn't afford to have all those sort of supernumeraries around, and you used it for illusion. And, illusion means stage play. Latin root of illusion is play, and like a stage play. And so I was always interested in theater and science and light and frequency and connectivity and how people respond to those things just in their limbic systems, how you can feel just by color, how you can feel by angle of light, how you can feel by darkness, shadow, play, all of that. So
interesting. So can I just ask you this question then, because I know a lot of people would sort of look at the very practical skills that you had, disassembling cameras, learning about all of these very, very much like vocational skills on the job. How does one then go from, okay, I'm going to know all of the mechanical ins and outs, I'm really an engineer, and then making the leap from engineer to proprioceptive hacker and experience designer? What's the arc for you to sort of go, like, when was the moment where it switched from I'm going to take the screwdriver and then I'm going to, but now I'm going to think about how this ride is going to make people's lives change. You know, I want to, like, I don't understand, but I want to know.
There was a startup called Digital Domain, and one of the producers who had worked with me at Imagineering had gone over. They were still in the hallways of Lightstorm, and they were commissioned to do a test for T2 3D. And she said, I don't know anything about stereo cameras. And I had known, like, that was my sort of entree in, and when I had worked on Muppet Vision 3D with Jim Henson.
Cool.
And
so awesome.
And they had, this is where I learned about performance capture with a Waldo, how to capture spirit of a human being. And it is also where I learned about really how much light you needed, how to shoot, what the cinematic vocabulary was, the limitations of stereo photography. And she said, you're gonna come and set up a 3D film festival for Jim Cameron, and you're gonna help teach him about stereo filmmaking. And that's what I did. And literally it becomes like that. Like, hey, you kid, you know about this.
Yeah.
Or that's how I got to Imagineering. The head of production, Marty Katz, said, you've been on set watching for all these years as a PA, as an intern, and we think you should go over to Walt Disney Imagineering because we're going to make theme park films using these celebrities, and we're going to bring professional filmmakers to Imagineering, and you should go too. And I had already had one of my older bosses, who was my first boss, who was she was a production person, but really was a fine artist. And she said, you have to come over here. You have to come over here. These are your people. And I had actually been mentored by Frank Wells, who gave me to the head of the New Technologies Committee, Bob Lambert, and he said, someday, kid, it's going to be cool to be a girl and a scientist. And there you go. I was nurtured. I really was nurtured. They were super kind to me. And that's how it was a gift, because my people really were Imagineers. And I believe, as you know, Little I Imagineer is a thing that is accessible to everybody. It's a mindset. It is the way you are born. It is not Walt Disney Imagineering. It is a way of being. And most of our audience here in the AUREA community are Imagineers. They've been making, experiences and products and things that they grab out of thin air for most of their lives.
I think that it is so true to sort of recognize there's a common bond between everybody here, and in a way that I've always felt that the VR community is sort of in its best form and not the one where it's like in a massive hype cycle, and that's I actually really liked it. Just as an aside, I really liked it when VR kind of went like down the backside of that hype cycle a couple years ago, because the best comment was like, oh, well, look, the tourists are gone, and it was like, oh, it's the season for the folks that really care about this and who really want to,
still need the tourists.
You need the tourists, right? You need the revenue, you need all of their energy as well. But I think that's one of the things that drew me to it in the beginning, was because I saw, this blue ocean. I saw this potential for just incredible means of communication. Marketing actually was another one of the things that hit me, of course, and as like an opportunity. But yeah, I mean, to see that everybody is sort of inspired by this work. And you mentioned stereo, And I kind of wanted to talk about that because I think it's really interesting that, we have been hacking this technology. Photography, you mentioned Thomas Edison, and, going all the way back to the 1800s and the first stereoscopic images. We were trying to create illusion of being there, of being in a place, of being somewhere. And that's always been, a sort of a human endeavor.
Yes. Storytelling. This is what I saw, because unless, like, it's research, unless you come back and tell the story, then it becomes exploration. It cannot be, you have to tell the story. And the best way to tell the story is with a picture. And I think that, or you're describing it, or on a wall, or you're painting it, or you're idealizing it. And so, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We come from church, we come from 19th century English landscaping. You look at many of the Disney iconic architecture, and it is derived from historic architecture. When we say iconic, we mean something familiar. There's something that is then hyper-realized. And so, but you look at things, and the inside of Flight of Passage, the apotheosis scene, is the inside really of Exeter Cathedral. It is, 16th century Gothic English architecture. And because it is, makes you look up. Everything has sweeping Gothic lines. And so when you're doing research, it really is about you don't want to invent, you don't have to reinvent. You just have to quote genius.
So the citation of genius, the reference to the people that came before us, our creative ancestors.
Absolutely.
And this is it's really great to hear you talk about it. And I think in this sort of in your unique wisdom, especially having done this in sort of in a continuous and an evolving way for so many years, and now you're doing when you're working on, for example, this experience of going to space, right? And I think that all of these things they do build upon each other, and you're able to take those things that
yes,
you've
our
learned.
ride just happens to leave the planet.
Yeah,
right. So
one ride leaves the planet.
Right. So I mean, it is definitely an evolution, but it is transformation through adventure. It is adventure travel. It is for good. You want to go up to look down to see how delicate our planet is, so that you come back and do good. And so, space for the curious. It is, we have been curious about what is up there for most of our existence. And so we are just really talking about broadening the audience, broadening the history, putting it in a bigger context, because it is a bigger context. It's not just about Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. It can't be that. There's cosmology up there. There's so much up there that is our history of curiosity and storytelling. And I always think about, Campfire. That's a dome. That's a perfect dome show. Campfire, and it goes into darkness. And as you get closer to it, there's more story there. So I think that I'm drawn to humanism, our basic human existence, and how we really understand the universe.
I mean, it is infinite, right? So in that way that this work can also be infinite, I feel like, the thing that's interesting as well is being able to do it in such a focused way. Like, I have this project, and I think that's why when I look at these experiences such as a theme park ride, and I realize, wait, how do you even start that? Because you have to get all of these people together to agree it's going to look like this, or it's going to follow this path, and then the outcome is this.
There's usually a business case.
It seems complicated. Maybe the business case.
There's always a business case that starts this conversation. But again, if you're putting it into Disney's Animal Kingdom as a great, and you have the basic keys of Animal Kingdom, people are like, but there's no animals in Pandora, and you're like, of course there are. There's banshees. It's a keystone species. It's what tells the health of the planet. The restoration of Pandora is based on the restoration of this keystone species of the banshee, of the ikran. And if you look at sort of that after the RDA, this is post-conflict, and you have ecotourism, and you have the restoration of environment from being a Superfund site, and so you have the same values that are happening everywhere outside in Disney's Animal Kingdom. So the sanctity of nature, and the transformation through adventure, and you have these themes that you then have to express. How would I know I'm Pandora? Because everything else in Disney's Animal Kingdom is on Earth. And how would you know had gone to Pandora? Well, floating mountains are the only thing that tells you don't have the same kind of gravity. Well, that's a really expensive proposition. And so how do you do that? How do you do that in a financially responsible way? And then, we're on Pandora. There are no signs, right? So what is intuitive navigation? How would I know that's the Banshee ride? How would I know that that's the Navi River journey? How would I know all of these things? And intuitive navigation, portals, bridges, water, a lot of water. It's alive. And so you really do usually start with a set of core ideas, thematics, and then you have to use the word as expressed by. I always talk about that. I learned that from Joe Rohde, who is my mentor, and it is a craft, and you need to be able to sort of know things intuitively without words. I should not. IP is really makes things much harder. So how do you fit it into Animal Kingdom that has its own IP? How do you put Pandora? It's very hard. But if you work hard enough to find the keys, you actually really do find a perfect intersection. The films and Jim Cameron and Disney's Animal Kingdom, they go perfectly together. There's that's how you use that as the organizing structure creatively, so that your team starts very small, but you use these words as expressed by, and usually give the team autonomy, and everybody all designers solve within those, the definition of those keys. And it's amazing how you can get more and more people, all the way out to craftspeople that were not in those rooms, and they're making the same decisions because they understand the expression of those thematic values. They just do. They can choose a doorknob by themselves. Autonomy is super important because you can't go fast if you have to go back to Joe Rohde and ask the question all the time. Hey, what doorknob should we use? Right. They should know what doorknob to use.
They should just intrinsically know it
from the value set, from like at a place where nature is the boss. And would you choose a stainless steel doorknob, or would you choose a pounded brass doorknob?
So we can't go back to the boss and we can't ask them. We have to just know it ourselves and understand it intrinsically, that there's a maybe not a right answer and a wrong answer, but there's a direction.
So there's an answer that falls within, and you have project managers who come back and said, we just poured that concrete. It's not right. I've heard you speak about this, and it is smooth, and it's at Disney's Animal Kingdom, or it's in Pandora, and we need to re-pour it again. And you're like, what? And they're like, yeah, because it doesn't fit. And absolutely everybody. And again, it is a good financial decision because that note's going to come back from somebody. And
somebody's always ready to say no.
Right. No, actually, it's a limitation of yeses. We really tried to lead by a limitation of yes, because I think that no is the end of the conversation. And really, the person that is giving the note should know by the time they ask again, they'll know when to stop asking. Mm-hmm. They will. They'll know when they give a note again that they're like, yeah, that was silly. It's done. Right, I can let that go. Yes, no one's going to notice. And if they're noticing it, then you haven't done the rest of your job.
Yeah.
So a limitation of yeses is always, I think, a more effective way of managing creative folks.
It is. And I think just one maybe last parting sort of thought. You have this quote that you love so much from Alan Watts that you have used you used it at the AUREA Awards. I know that you love it. It is, I wonder
what you would do if you had the power to dream anything you wanted to. Yes, I mean, Walt Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it. I think that I'm a dreamer. And I'm a person who puts together things that, people ask what's the Disney difference, and I just think that there's no just Disney difference. There's people who will take a lot of off-the-shelf things and use them in ways they were never meant to be used. And, when you have the resources, good design is inexpensive. It really is. I think, and speed is the thing that makes things really inexpensive. But I think that the ability to have the luxury of putting things together that should not go together and the time to integrate them. Imagineers, our core competency really is integration. And again, it's a wonder to watch real Imagineers, people who just think outside of a normal train of thought, going, oh, yeah, let's go try that. You know, and that it's really a luxury to be able to go try that.
Absolutely.
It's a dream.
It's great. And again, so inspiring. So Amy, thank you
Thank
for
you.
chatting with me. Again, I feel like I learned something every time I chat with you, and hear something that I feel like is another hook for another conversation, for another, you know, deep dive I want to do with you. And I know that folks who will see this and want to, you know, get in touch with you and follow your work are absolutely, you know, feeling the same way I am, which is like, you know, thank you, and so grateful for you to take your time to share your thoughts and to tell folks what it's been like, and you know how you've been able to do this, because I think it is a huge inspiration. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. So yeah, wrapping up with Amy Jupiter. Thank you so much for watching. Amy has so much to share with all of us, and it's been a pleasure to chat with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Bye.